Now, Charles Blow, who writes an op-ed piece for the Times, whose writing I really like, had this to say yesterday. On Tuesday night, after Hillary Clinton trounced Bernie Sanders in state after state, Sanders took to a podium before throngs of thousands in Arizona and delivered a stirring speech for nearly an hour. You didn't see it? Understandable. It wasn't covered live by any of the major cable news channels at all, not even a couple of minutes. Why? As the Huffington Post reported, quote, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC all declined to carry Sanders' speech, instead offering punditry about the evening with the chyons, the writing at the bottom of the screen, promising awaiting Trump and standing by for Trump. This episode again drew cries about what has become known as the Bernie Blackout, a failure of news organizations, particularly television networks, to seriously cover the Sanders candidacy. I must say, Charles writes, that the numbers back this up. But I want to put more of the focus here on the disparity between the Democratic candidates. Clinton's coverage on television has dwarfed Sanders. As the New York Times Upshot report this week pointed out, Clinton has received more than twice the news and commentary about her campaign on television, in newspapers and magazines, and on social media as Sanders has. In December, the Sanders campaign complained in a news release titled, Why the Bernie Blackout on Corporate Network News? As the news release that he sent out put it, quote, the insurgent campaign that has drawn the biggest crowds on the presidential campaign trail has been all but ignored on the flagship television network newscasts, according to the Tyndall Report, which tracks nightly news coverage by NBC, CBS, and ABC, end quote. The Tyndall Report's annual totals for the year 2015 found that Clinton received 121 minutes of campaign coverage on the networks, while Sanders received 20. Clinton, 121 minutes of campaign coverage, just news items. 121 minutes, Bernie Sanders got 20. And at the time that this was going on, Sanders was drawing crowds 3, 4, 5, 6 times as large as Clinton's. The Times public editor Margaret Sullivan, who I just quoted for you at length, weighed in back in September. She wrote, the Times has not ignored Mr. Sanders' campaign, but it hasn't always taken it very seriously. The tone of some stories is regrettably dismissive, even mocking at times. This is in the New York Times. Some of that is focused on the candidate's age, his appearance, his style, rather than what he has to say. End quote, Margaret Sullivan. And Charles Blow says a strong argument could be made by all candidates that there has been some level of media malpractice as it relates to the amount of coverage received by their campaigns and that of the Republican frontrunner. You know, he's referring to the fascist pig fuck Donald Trump. And, Charles adds, they would be right. If any candidate had received the huge media coverage of the current Republican frontrunner, they would likely be in a stronger position now. If any of the candidates had received the huge media coverage, I think Charles Blow said a couple of months ago he was never going to mention Trump's name again. So he calls him the GOP frontrunner. But if any candidate had received the huge media coverage of the current GOP frontrunner, they would likely be in a stronger position now. You're damn right they would. Blow goes on, but the more consequential distinction for Democrats at this point is coverage between Clinton and Sanders. There appear to be two parallel universes of Democratic voters this season. One disproportionately older, the other disproportionately younger, whose habits make them almost invisible to each other. Clinton's voters may be less likely to show up at rallies or post on social media or be serial commenters who commandeer comment sections, but they do show up to vote. But these are the same voters who are less likely to hear much news about Sanders. In a February Pew Research Center survey, a plurality of people 18 to 29 said that the social media was their most helpful source for learning about the 2016 presidential contest election. A plurality of those 30 and over cited cable news as the primary source. Network news was the most popular source for those 65 and older. The Sanders campaign and its supporters have a right to be unhappy about the disparity. But the Clinton campaign has its own view of Sanders' supporters, media grousing, and, as to be expected, it isn't kind. As the Times reported last month, quote, the Clinton campaign argues that Mr. Sanders has benefited from the superficial horse race journalism he scorns, and that coverage has largely focused on his avuncular style. By the word avuncular means uncle, and cross-generation appeal rather than through inspections of his proposals or record in Congress. The Vermont senators in Sanders' continued discrediting of the news media, the Clinton campaign sees an effort to inoculate himself from critical coverage. So what Clinton is trying to put out there is that even though she gets 5 times the news coverage that Sanders does, the only reason Sanders is complaining is so he'll get more coverage, inoculate himself against critical coverage. What kind of coverage that would criticize Bernie Sanders is available? Anybody know? What kind of coverage that would criticize Hillary Clinton is available? Oh, Jesus Christ! I mean, how much do you want? A truckload? A train load? 20 train loads. The woman is facing 3 criminal investigations. Last time I checked, Sanders isn't facing any. Clinton relies on millionaires and billionaires for her funding, like George Soros, like Wall Street, while Sanders relies on me and you